Hey, what's up? I'm Jas Davis, and today I'm going to walk you through a full photo editing process using Adobe Lightroom for mobile. I'll be using some photos I took from a recent trip to Death Valley, California. I'll be taking this photo from this to this. Love using Adobe Lightroom for mobile right on my phone as my on-the-go editor for quick turnaround and processing. Death Valley was a really great place to take photos. It sort of felt like anywhere you pointed the camera was a good shot. I took some mountain range photos that I think could be really fun to play around with, so let's open up one of these. So first off, I've uploaded my shots from Death Valley onto my phone, and I'm gonna import them into the Lightroom for mobile app. One of the things I really like to do right off the bat is look at my exposure and contrast. I even explore around with just pressing the auto button in the app because it's pretty incredible at getting a rough gauge at where your exposure might be off. Just pressing that button and getting that slight exposure boost and contrast adjustment, I think it does a really good job. I'm gonna hop in a little bit further though and just adjust the contrast slightly. To do that, I'm gonna hit light, and then I'll see my exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. So I'm gonna make this image a bit more contrasty, just sliding that a bit more. Maybe I'll bring the exposure down slightly to 0.5. and touching my shadows a bit as well. I'm thinking I want this image to be pretty punchy, so that's why I've got the contrast up so high. All right, so I think I'm roughly liking how my levels are looking. Let's check out some of the color presets in the Lightroom app now. And essentially what these color presets are, they're saved photo adjustments that you can apply to a photo just for a quick edit or for some extra inspiration. They're pretty awesome. All you gotta do is tap here, and it'll bring up a long list of all sorts of color presets. These things are amazing. I get a bit lost in these and definitely have a good time trying all of them out. Let's check out Style Futuristic. This seems cool. Right off the bat, clicking some of these, I'm like, yep, that's ready to go. Check out some landscape. Let's check out subject travel. This is kind of getting that punchy look I was looking for with the contrasty image, so I might go into this more. One of the nice things you can do is click on the preset again, and it'll let you adjust the intensity of the filter. So this one's a bit much all the way up, so I might bring it down a little bit to about 89. 90, that's looking pretty fun. I'm kind of liking that. I think I want to make just a couple more adjustments to the color of the photo. So what I'm going to do is open up the color panel and mess around with the temperature, just ever so slightly warming it up. Kind of want to have like a funny purple tint to it. And then let's boost the saturation, why not? You can go even deeper in the color panel by clicking on the color mix. I love messing around with the hue saturation with colors, so let's check that out. I'm gonna click on my orange hue here and just boost up the saturation on that slightly. I like getting that mountain to almost a weird hue. I mean, it's how my human eye was seeing it out there in the desert, but I'm just trying to reflect it for y'all. Let's check out the yellow hue as well. Maybe boost that a little bit. Anyway, that's looking pretty fun. Getting some pretty wild colors going on there. I have one feature in the Lightroom for mobile app that I want to point out. I'm not going to use it on this shot, but it's one that I love, and that is the lens blur tool. Say you had a portrait that you shot and you didn't quite crank down your aperture enough and the background isn't too blurry. This tool is pretty incredible, and it'll essentially add a realistic looking bokeh and background blur to your photo. You definitely should try it out. I'm not gonna use it on this landscape shot since I shot so wide and it just makes sense that everything is in focus, but it's definitely a fun tool that I love to mess around with. Just so you can kind of see what the lens blur tool does do to a photo, I'm gonna crank up the amount to 100. All right, so moving on, I'll usually go down the line with what Lightroom for mobile has to offer. So let's hop into the effects panel. I do like using texture, clarity, and dehaze sensitively, but they are very powerful. Essentially what they do to your photo is just make it pop like crazy. They'll bring out all those details and little extra nooks and crannies of a shot. So for a landscape shot, I think it's really useful. Let's just crank up the clarity, crank up the texture, and crank up the dehaze just slightly. I also like to add a small vignette on a lot of my shots, so I'm gonna just put this to -4. I just think it makes that center pop more and have the focus be towards that spiky ridge line that we're looking at there. I got my texture, my clarity, and my dehaze up around +10 for this, which I think is a nice little level to be at. I add grain pretty often to my shots. I don't necessarily think that this landscape needs it, but let's just check it out. It's always good to guess and check. Not mad. I put it at +15. Let's keep it around there. Why not? We can then hop into the detail panel and do a bit of the same. Again, the sharpen tool is very, very sensitive. It's crazy the amount of detail it brings out and really can make your photo seem super crispy. When I first got into photography editing, I remember I used to crank my clarity, crank my sharpening, and really bring out all sorts of artifacts in my photos. And as I've been editing photos longer and longer, I think I've pulled back on using a lot of those tools, but I still will forever probably add a little bit of sharpen, just a tiny bit. So I'm gonna keep that around 50. That feels good. Once you're happy with your shots, it's time to save and share them with the world. And that's how I achieved this edit, using a combination of lighting and color adjustments, filter presets, and effects, all inside Adobe Lightroom for mobile. Hope you enjoyed this step-by-step tutorial for this edit. Try it for yourself by clicking the link in description. Peace.